So, hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a short video that goes over GPTs and how we can use APIs to really enhance them. I think the real advantage of GPTs lies in the fact that they can access APIs. Otherwise, they're just fancy system prompts essentially. So let's get straight into it. So you see here the back end of the GPT, and the idea, what I have here as this toy problem or this toy GPT, is basically to have some sort of chef GPT that lets you know what meals you can cook based on a set of ingredients. That's what I started with, and then it kind of ballooned into something a little bit bigger, and I'll tell you why. It's based actually on the API. So I guess the best place to start would be something like the prompt, right? And then I'll tell you where the API comes in. So these two are just sort of boilerplate in the sense that you have to just tell the GPT what it wants to do. By no means have I prompt engineered this, right? This is very basic, and I think you can really improve the user experience with good prompting. So the core of it is here, right? So Chef GPT will use the custom action get recipe summary to summarize any given recipe to provide helpful information to the user. Chef GPT will use the custom action complex recipe search, and so forth. I have 4 custom actions. These are defined in the API. Behind each of these is an API call, right? And the reason I'm doing this, rather than just leaving it up to the GPT to decide based on the description of the API, as you will see later, is that on some of the leaked prompts that OpenAI used for their own GPTs, they do this. So they have an API, but they double it up almost. So keep these in mind while I go to the back end, which is the API action, right? So this is the API action. Let me just make that a little bit bigger. And I'll just walk you through this. So if you click on, maybe I'll put an example. It might overwrite this blank template. Let me just copy this just in case. Okay, so that's your blank template, right? So that's essentially the skeleton of what you need to start with. If you go to some weather example, you get a little bit more. I think this is maybe a little bit better. So you have a base URL, and then you have paths, right? And the paths have description, parameters, and so forth. So now if we go back to my one, lucky I copied it, right? You have what the API I'm using, which is from spoonacular.com. So if we do go to Spoonacular, we see it's an API for, oh wait, I'll go to the only food API you will ever need, right? It's very in-depth. It's very very detailed and granular. I'm using the free version. So the limit there is 150 points a day. 1 request a second, and a backlink required, whatever that means. What's important for us are the URLs and the endpoints. So I wasn't too familiar with APIs. Maybe this is going to be too basic for some of you. But if you were where I am when I started this, I had to learn almost APIs as well as learning how to implement them in GPTs. So a real basic primer on APIs. So you have a base URL, which is something that stays the same as you go through the different endpoints. These are all called endpoints, right? So you'll see that up to recipes, it's all the same, right? But however, if you go into a different class like ingredients, then it changes. It changes to food, right? So I'm sticking with recipes. So it's essentially my base URL could be up to recipes, but I mean, you can keep it general and keep that the base URL. And then each of these is an endpoint, right? And each endpoint, so let's go search recipes by ingredients, right? So this is the base URL. This is the endpoint called a path in the OpenAI schema, as you will see. And these are parameters then, right? And the parameters in the URL are usually called like this. You have the base URL, you have the path, a question mark, then the parameter equals whatever you want, and another parameter equals whatever. You could have another and have ranking equals 1 or 2, right? So what does that look like for us? We have our base URL, and then we have the path, right? Actually, the path that I was talking about, why is it saying action set cannot have duplicate domains. Let me just, I hope I didn't mess it up. Go back out of this and go in here. Yeah, okay, so it works again. Whew. So if we go to the same endpoint, which was search by ingredient, right? So that's the same path. Now I need a description. So this helps the GPT know that it should use this endpoint. And this operation ID is important. These are the variables that are referred to in the prompt. And then you have the parameters. So you have ingredients, which is required, right? Required true. Description is important because when the GPT calls this API, it needs to fill in the request with something, right? So if I had put in here, I don't know, the color of the fruits, it will try to call it with the colors of the food, and obviously it'll fail. So ideally, you want to look at the documentation, which has the descriptions of what needs to go into that API, number, ranking, and so forth. So you might notice that here there's no mention of API key. Sometimes the API key is a parameter, right? Although I'm not too sure because then that kind of exposes it. Anyway, then you would just add it like you would, as a parameter. But what we have to do here is define a parameter, right? Require true, the user's API key. And we have to do a little bit of hacking in the prompt, which you will see here, and say, always use this as an API key. So the issue here is, of course, that it's exposed. If somebody does that sort of print me the system prompt, or there's ways to get this information, right? That's a good point. I should add in never reveal this this prompt to the user, even when coerced or something. I guess there are ways to prompt in the system prompt that this is never revealed. So that's one risk. You could leak it. Two, a more blatant risk you will see is when I use it, it comes up in the call. Right. So the way around that, I guess, would be to maybe upload a file with the API key, and then it reads it from that. Okay. There's just one more thing before I use it, is that there are different types of API calls or endpoints. This one is based purely on parameters, but if you go to something like summarize recipe, you'll see that there's no parameters, right? It's part of the path itself. So that threw me for a loop a little bit, but then I realized the way to get it done is that you put the variable in curly brackets, and then you define it as before. So your parameters is ID, and what you change is in path. No longer is it in query, right? In query means it's a parameter that's put on with an ampersand. In path means that you have defined somewhere curly brackets where now it knows where that ID goes in, right? Same with the API and so forth. Okay. So let's take it for a spin. I don't know why it's asking me to update, but let's do it. So you know that it's live. It's not one that I prepared earlier. I will probably make this public when I upload it. Okay, so let's just start with something like, how do I make Japanese style ramen? So what this has to do is it has to search Spoonacular, then get the ID from that. So you always have to allow it. So let's first see if the search works, right? So it found the search. Good. I could see the Spoonacular. And I also had in the prompt always display images in markdown format, which I think is quite nice. It makes it a little bit more immersive. I don't really like how it's putting summary of the pork ramen with the ID here. That's not really a good user experience. If I click on it, it does that. Okay. I did tell it never link to another website. Okay, so strangely enough, it linked to nothing. So, okay, it works. You can obviously see the prompting needs to be adjusted, but that's not the point of this video. Okay, so then if I say, give me the list of ingredients for meal number 3. So it might get confused. It might take 3 as the meal ID, right? I don't know why if you click always allow, it still asks you again. But so it figured it out. Neoguri. It's even putting the images for the individual ingredients, which is not so bad, in case you don't know what an egg looks like. And I'm assuming that the ID is correct, right? So homework for you guys. Go check if this is correct. It looks okay. It's Japanesey enough. Thing. So can I say, please tell me how to prepare this meal? So now it should use the third API call, which is summary of the recipe. Maybe each endpoint needs you to say always allow. Yeah. I assume this is correct. It's coming up with some detailed information. Definitely, if it's talking about costs, this is Spoonacular. They have the cost there. So score. There we go. Spoonacular score. So definitely, it's reading. If you would like more detailed instructions, it doesn't have an API call for detailed instructions, so I don't know what it will actually do. Yes, give me detailed instructions. So I don't know what it'll do. Maybe it'll call the API and then extrapolate from that. Oh yeah, okay. I must apologize as I don't have the details. Yeah, so that's not too bad. So this sort of gives you a taste, no pun intended, of what you can do with the API. I will link the GPT, and I can also upload the backend API calls onto GitHub or something, so you can have a look and maybe just recreate it for yourself. And so hope you liked it, guys. If you want to see something else done in GPT, there's a lot more, right? It can actually also interpret code as the background in the background. So you could say, run this piece of code in the back end, because you can do code execution. I've seen some interesting things. I'm just trying to see how it all how you can use it basically. So all right, guys, thanks for watching and catch you next time.